Alright guys, welcome to my channel. My name is DJ and today we're going to be talking about the DM setter funnel, how I collect data, what I do with that data, and how I make data interpretations, conversion optimization, and scaling. And I'll show you a live example how I did all of these things with one client that made $42,000 from his DMs in 45 days without any prior experience of hiring an appointment setter, without any previous appointment setting before that as well. So today, guys, we're going to be talking about how I exactly did that and why this funnel is responsible for collecting over 5 million US dollars over the last 3 years alone for my B2C business. And you can see that we also have multiple processes here, but even in our peak year, 2023, we did $500,000 a month for some time with this exact funnel, doing over $2 million in cash, excluding wires here, with just what I'll show you today. So what we're also going to do is show you exactly how you can leverage this exact funnel for yourself here as well, and what I specifically look at when I intend to grow not only my B2C business, but also those for my clients with very high leverage. This funnel is the exact reason why I am successful with what I exactly do and how we've actually done over 5 million and gotten 1,600 plus clients inside our B2C program with just this profile alone here on Instagram. It's also the exact same funnel that actually one client of mine, Marcella, did $15.2 thousand cash collected in just 3 weeks. Again, same as Joey, without any previous experience of hiring an appointment setter, having an appointment setter, or even knowing anything about appointment setting realistically when it comes to what I'll show you today in terms of like the exact frameworks. So let's go over what this actually is. So the DM setter funnel. So everybody, of course, that is likely watching this already has an audience. And if you have that audience, I'll show you exactly how we are able to consistently extract the value, the valuable leads from our audience here towards actually booked calls and how we convert them with ease as well. Because we all do, of course, story sequences and call to action content, and then we do outreach towards these specific people. And we don't only do story sequences and call to action content, but my DM setters are also making sure that we follow up with every person that is actually inside our ecosystem to make sure that we engage with them, because we're following you for a specific reason, and that's why we reach out. So from those things, the story sequences and call to action content, you're going to generate a bunch of leads. Now, these leads are, of course, going to land inside your inbox when they message you with PDF for the courses or the free trainings that we're offering to them. And then what happens is that my DM setters are going to get those people in the actual buyer state of mind, as I call it. And so what does that actually do? Why do you even have DM setters in the first place? Of course, we have DM setters because if you're aware of the marketing funnel, the buyer's pyramid, is that 90% is generally not interested or actually ready to buy. Only the 7 and the 3% are open to buying and buying right now. And a lot of people just focus on that 10% with their marketing. But DM setters are actually able to accelerate from somebody that knows they are not interested to being interested into that 7 to 3%, doing a pay in full on the same day with a sales call that we've just recently booked a couple of hours ago, versus like letting your marketing doing all this heavy lifting. So DM setters are really the accelerators of your marketing funnel here. So buyer state of mind, I'll get to that in a second, what exactly means, but my setters basically follow a 4-step FIRE framework. What they first do is flag the intent of the person. We really try to filter the hand raisers from the actual lurkers. We got to make sure that the people we talk to have a certain intent behind following the profile before we, of course, engage the conversation. So after that, we're initiating the frame. We're really setting the tone, but also make sure that we transition the conversation. It's not that we, of course, forcefully do this, but by asking very deliberate questions, we are consistently in control. And this makes it so that we can actually talk about the goals that that person has. And we do that by revealing and reversing. We're uncovering goals, we're uncovering pain, we look for urgency, and then try to find the buying gap. And that is getting us close to what I call the buyer state of mind. Because with those things, you can now actually elevate your solution as the potential fix towards their problem. So we position the offer as their best next step. Again, we're not selling inside at the end. So we're just making sure that we help them to actually get into a transformation where they start to believe that this is actually possible for them as well. And so what that leads to, guys, is the clarity phase. A lot of people inside the B2C space, they don't even know where they're at and what they really want. They basically live on autopilot NPC mode a lot of times, as I call it. So if we don't get people clarity on where they are currently, what they want and what the gap is that is stopping them from actually achieving their destination, then how is your offer going to make sense for them? Because that exact thing is going to then build conviction. It's what I call the conviction phase. It's a solution-based offer that starts to build clarity in relation to how this is actually doable for them and how it's actually going to help them get to that B situation. Because they don't see the clarity that is required for them to get what they desire or to actually take control. So by doing these things, we're getting them those exact things. And if you have them clear on the clarity phase, if you have them clear in the conviction phase, then what happens next is that they will start to go into the belief phase. We're kind of like rewiring their mindset because we care about them. We've just talked about their specific goals, their specific struggles, and how you have a potential solution to wanting to actually help them go through that transformation. Because a lot of people don't believe that they can actually make a massive shift in just a matter of months because nobody cares about them. Everybody is just trying to sell. But if you get people clear on these exact things, I'll promise you'll stop having the exact people that come to your sales calls and tell you, I don't know what this is about. I thought that this was going to be for free. I'm not even sure if I want to make a change. And I'm not saying that you have to do these exact things to close somebody. What I'm telling you here is that if you get people in this state of mind, the buyer state of mind, you get more deals that actually go through, have higher cash per call because the leads that you're putting on the calendar actually know what they want, know where they are, know how it's going to be solved, and start to believe that they can actually make that decision and do this for themselves. So it's a completely different ballgame and it changed everything for us. Even here on our calendar, you can, for example, here see on my main closers calendar that we don't per se care about a ton of booked calls. We focus on putting quality here. The majority that you see here is actually closing. It's not the color that we're looking at. That's our confirmation system. But we close a lot of deals because people have conviction and clarity in relation to what they actually want to do. Trust me, I've been there. I had seasons where I've booked 800 calls in a single month. We had 3 triagers, 5 closers, and 2 setters. It was an absolute sweatshop, and truth be told, nobody was actually making money because we were just booking sales calls. And a lot of people do this. They go off of the vanity metric in terms of like data collection to tell their setters like, I just want you to fill the calendar. But filled calendars don't equal sales, and it doesn't equal scalability if you don't have a system behind that, because everybody can book calls. That is the hard truth. And so if you look at data collection, for example, I just hired this brand new setter, for example, for our B2C business because we were canceled for the last month as well by Meta, unfortunately. So one of my setters left, I trained a new one, and the first thing that I do is make sure that they get clear on how important their end of day report is and the accountability that we give them to start tracking their data consistently. Because if you don't have data, then what decisions are you going to make inside your business to have it actually potentially scale? It's very hard to do so. So what you want to do is get them clear on filling out an end of day report and keep them accountable for doing so. And with that, you want to actually them to log their data. Now, if we look at this data log, it's not per se relatable to what I have here above to what this setter put here as numbers, but it's just to highlight for you that these are the minimum things that you want to track if you want to have a successful DM setter funnel. New outbound conversations, new inbound conversations, a certain amount of follow-ups, calls proposed, and qualified calls booked, because calls proposed and calls booked is not even the same thing. So after that, you want to do the data accumulation where they put it inside one big sheet, which this does automatically, by the way, and you can see the total amount of conversations that you have here on a monthly and a weekly basis as well. This is monthly what we're looking at. So for example, we have a total amount of actions, activity, new outbound conversations, new inbound conversations, and follow-ups that lead to a certain result. We have 270 calls proposed, 107 calls booked, and 86 qualified calls. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but I'll tell you, this is comparable to having a 50 to 100K a month business in new cash consistently as compared to having businesses that do these exact same numbers. And I know because I've got a lot of friends in the B2C space that do 300 to 400 calls, but pull in the same cash. Which one would you prefer? The easy business that actually focuses on quality, has a very lean team that is sustainable, or having people that you constantly need to rehire because your closers keep leaving, because you fill them up with leads, but nobody's actually making money. It's an easy decision there, right? And so after you do that, you have the DM setter tracking sheet that actually allows you to see what all the data is that we want to actually track. Here you can see some numbers. We just started to use this one with the new setter, so I have very clear and clean data as well per setter performance. But these are some of the metrics that you could start tracking for yourself if you're going to start to take your DM setter funnel seriously. Now, after that, what do you do with this data? Well, of course, you can look at just setting data alone and improve. And I'll show you here in a second exactly what I look at, why I look at these things, and how I tend to improve that month over month, but also how this compares to sales tracking. Because when we're talking about sales tracking, you don't only want to track your scheduled calls, but also how many were actually live. What was the show percentage in that sense? How many offers did we actually make? That tells us something about the quality of these leads as well, right? Because we can still have setters that book quality calls, but overall, if we don't make enough offers and we still don't see that the show percentage is high enough, it may still be something inside the pre-call process in terms of like how they were showing up with the funnel that you have there, but very much as well inside the actual DM setter funnel. So you need to review the conversations, whether this is actually happening that leads to increasing these numbers. Because we show you here in a second, without a single new lead this month, without adding anything to your audience this specific month, you can still make more money by optimizing on your leaky buckets. So these are some things that you could track here potentially if you're serious about tracking your sales data as well. And this is what we track, for example, knowing exactly where we stand for the month. Now, one of the most important metrics in terms of like why I've pulled this up here as well is that we look at cash collected per call. Currently, our cash collected per call is somewhere between $1,000 to $1,500 per month. And that tells you something about the total quality of everything that your sales team is actually producing. If you have a certain amount of cash collected per call and you're able to calculate that based off of these previous numbers, it literally tells you that, for example, when we do 86 qualified booked calls and we have a 75% show rate, that we can take 75% of these booked calls, multiply that by the collected per call, and that is very likely going to be the outcome that we're going to hit at the end of the month if we want to make sure that we hit our sales numbers. So let's go take a look at data interpretation here, because what we look at is, first of all, the total number of conversations. It's the total volume done. But before I touch onto this, let me explain you that appointment setting is an activity-based role. It's not as what a lot of people think, that it is actually an outcome-based role. You cannot influence somebody to actually book a call. We try to with the frameworks, but the outcome is still unclear because you're not speaking to somebody face-to-face where we can influence them with body language, tonality, the words that we actually use. So understand that DM setting is an activity-based role. So this is the reason why we look at total volume. And the total volume is divided in 3 core metrics, guys. It is the number of outreaches that we do outbound. For example, here, if I go back to the profile, in terms of like doing that outreach, you're reaching out to your followers specifically as well, in terms of like, did they watch your stories? Did they like your content? Did they start to follow you for some while ago that you can pull lists from? We do this outreach to make sure that we can influence these numbers. We do follow-ups, and then we also track new inbound. These 3 things is what defines the core activity, the total convos, or the volume that is actually being done. So what do we do with that volume? What do we do with that metric? Well, if you're not making enough proposals, then nobody is actually setting calls, right? So we also track the calls proposed. And what this tells you is something about the efficiency of the setter, but also the skill set of the setter. Generally, what you want is a 3 to 5% total call proposal volume. If you do anything less than that, then your setter likely is not moving conversations in the right way, or they're sincerely just lacking the skill level to get them to the point of where it's actually worthy to book a call within the total amount of volume that they're doing on a daily or weekly basis. So 3 to 5% of total call volume tells you whether your setter is on track or off track. And still, even if they do this number, then track your total metrics here as well in relation to how many offers do we make, how many deposits do we close, how many closes do we actually have. Because still, if those numbers are very low, let's say you have a 20% close rate but 400 calls booked, something is off in terms of like how they propose those calls. So go back towards this chart here, take a screenshot, and identify for yourself if these things, this buyer state of mind is actually happening with your leads, because it's likely that is not the case. And so you lead up with the typical objections on your sales calls, and that's why you only have a 20% close rate, or your core closer your main piece of talent there, your chess piece, is actually having a close to 40 or 50% close rate, and the rest isn't eating because they lack the skill level, but the leads are also not in the right buyer state of mind. So new applications is what we look after, because calls proposed don't mean per se booked calls, right? We want to do the applications, let it basically do the heavy lifting. So it's either going to qualify people or disqualify people. And so you want to actually re-qualify the people that are disqualified, but it also tells you something about the quality of leads. If you get a ton of new applications in, but nobody's qualified, then your setters are not focusing on the right people, right? And so you can look at that sense as well in terms of like DM setter metrics. Then you look at calls booked. For example, what is the follow-through rate? If you have a plus 50% scheduling rate based on calls proposed, you're doing fairly well in the B2C space. In the B2B space, it should be more closer to 80 to 90% because people are a lot more serious and intentful. But on B2C, if you don't at least have a 50% scheduling rate, you can probably increase the skill level and the DM conversation flow of your setters and make sure that you get more calls booked. Because if you do propose a bunch of calls but nobody's booking, you're leaving money on the table, and it's likely somewhere in the process that these people, again, do not have the belief that this will actually help them, so they bail out. Now, after that, you're going to track the show up rate, and while this is already partly in the closing perspective, the closer realm, it is still important for your setters to actually track, because if we're still booking a bunch of calls but nobody's actually showing up, then it may be something in the pre-call process. Your closer may need to improve their pre-call process in terms of like making sure that they do their call confirmations well. But what it could also be, again, is that we don't have people in the right buyer state of mind, and they booked, but they also forgot that this will actually help them because they don't believe specifically that this will help them move forward, or they're not clear on what you're exactly going to help them with, right? And so for the B2C offers out there, if you're watching this, you want to have at least a 50 to 60% show rate on your B2C offers. If you're anything above that, you're doing particularly well, but there's probably still more money to be made. And now I'll show you exactly how I look at these metrics, and by just focusing on these things alone, you can make more money without adding a single new lead to your infrastructure or your business this month. And so let's look at a live example and how I do conversion optimization and help Joey scale, for example. Joey is a fitness coach. He has 370K followers, a lot of inbound, but it doesn't per se mean qualified leads, right? Because his audience is very broad. And still, we're able to extract the quality people month over month so far, making sure that his business is growing consistently. In just the first 3 weeks alone with a brand new setter, he collected 11,200, and just last month alone, he collected $30,000 just from his DMs in total in relation to what he did with a brand new DM setter. And so the thing that we're looking for is that the best sales teams are actually driving towards those sales numbers. The average sales teams are actually arriving at their sales numbers. And why do I say this? Joey is tracking his data meticulously, as you can see here. And I'll show you here in a second exactly how we tend to make improvements that drive towards his new revenue number for July versus not doing that and basically just arriving at a certain number where nobody knows how we actually did $60,000 in cash based on luck, and we just did a couple of actions, right? We're not reverse engineering or planning ahead to actually make sure that we hit those numbers. So we optimize for skill, and we need to understand why and how we actually do those things. So let's first go over Joey's data here. 6,000 conversations, 127 calls, 34 actually scheduled. So you can see that the booking rate is actually only 27% here. That is fairly low. That means that if Joey gets his booking rate to 50 to 60%, which more so should be the industry average, that he's doubling the amount of calls booked. And it is likely actually doubling the amount of money that he does in a single month, going from $30,000 to $60,000 in cash just by focusing on this single metric alone. And it has to do with the buyer state of mind, of course. So close rate, 38%, commissions for the setter, 2,000. So you can see that if we just focus on this single thing here, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's actually that simple because we track stuff and we make sure that we know where to improve, that the close rate stays the same, but still Joey would double his cash, the commissions for the setter would double, and without any new stuff, with the stuff that we already have, just improving over what we already have in place without adding a single new lead, just changing something inside the funnel in the process, we're going from $30,000 cash to $60,000 cash in just 1 month. Honestly, that is literally how it can go. So here we track the call proposal rate is setter skill level. So we make sure that the call proposals are better aligned with the buyer state of mind for the lead that lead to higher booking rates, getting closer to the 50 to 60%. New applications plus calls booked is buyer state of mind plus the belief system. And then the show rate is the lead's mindset. And so we want to make sure that we're also actually going to track those things. But if we, for example, look here, if we just look at here on the right in terms of like live example, how we're planning to improve that. Again, I just said it, but if we have the same amount of conversations, and if we just double the calls booked by focusing on a single metric that we have here on the left side, by getting that closer to 50%, and even if it's not going to be 50%, but 35 to 40, maybe even 45, maybe we even exceed the 50%, you can see how this exact business is already growing in just a matter of 30 days by focusing on the proper things. And so what it turns out to be like is that he would then not be having 34 calls, but 46, 64. And if we have 13 calls closed, we go to 26, then the cash is doubled. And so his setter commission is doubled as well, which increases, of course, the satisfaction of the entire sales team, let alone what the closers are doing, right? And so this is how you go from a business that is stuck versus a business that is actually scaling. So that is it, guys, for this exact video. If you want to know more about how you can actually install this setter funnel for yourself, or you need some help with that, then definitely feel free to reach out to me. If you want to have my free resource about the FIRE framework and the buyer state of mind, then drop FIRE below inside the comments, and I'll shoot you that over for free. And if you want to have a strategy session with me or a free audit, then make sure that you check out the description below and make sure that you book a call with me personally. All right, that's it.